I remember hearing Tony Robbins once say that the strongest force in the human condition is our need to remain consistent with how we see ourselves. And that topic of identity is something that I continue to lean in to understand its power and how it can impact us both positively and negatively. And in this episode, I unpack some personal insights and experiences on that possibility of who I'm currently being versus who we are capable of becoming. And so if you've ever wondered if there was more and how do we go about it, you'll really love this one. Can't wait to hear your thoughts. If you've ever worked incredibly hard to get something or somewhere, only to realize that you no longer want it anymore, well, this episode is for you. But before we get into that, let's recap on last week's episode. And this may be a spoiler alert if you haven't listened to it, or perhaps it's a newsflash update. But yep, Kate has decided to leave the podcast. Now, albeit that I knew the decision before she recorded the episode, I didn't hear the episode until you did. And I remember listening to it and just thinking, oh my goodness, what an absolute masterclass in speaking from her heart and truly like leaning into not doing the shoulds and following her heart. So from the outset, I will say, was I shocked when I heard it? Yes, I was. And when Kate told me that what her decision was, there was a moment of shock. Was there disappointment? No, not really. I think it was more just shock. And then once I come to acceptance, which was pretty quick, then Kate turned around and said, so you're not really trying to talk me into it. And I said, well, first of all, why would I talk you into it? Why would I talk you into doing something that no longer feels right for you? And if you recall the very first episode that we recorded, we said that we're not going to do the shoulds. And this is just one of those playing out in real time. And so to that, I'm going to give my summary, which is it was the right idea with absolutely the right person. And at the time of conception, it was absolutely the right time. Now, I'm not going to retell Kate's story, but obviously there was, I can't even do the maths. What was it? Like 6 months, maybe more, between us making the decision to it executing. And in that time, like she said, we evolve. And it's not that we are so vastly different, but it's for her to do what really feels right for her, and for me to like lean into this, which now I'm seeing as season 2 of Built to Last. It's the right thing. So to my beautiful wife, I want to say thank you for being the igniter to get this podcast up and running and off the ground, for continuing to inspire me and no doubt others to like practice what we preach of not doing the shoulds. And just, yeah, I couldn't be more proud. And not that I feel vulnerable now. I'm sure I'll feel comfortable with you guys on my own. But I'm also going to tell you I've got my first guest lined up, which I am also very, very excited about. So let's retrack, because this whole it was right until it wasn't is certainly a sentiment and a pattern that I see playing out. I'll look back and I'll start sharing some stories of how that's played out for me personally in my life. And if we go back to, like working so hard towards something, and then you either having it in your hand and it being on the precipice, and then it's no longer right. Now, for me, the first story for that, I could almost lean back, probably earlier, but let's not go back too far. Let's say high school, right? Where they ask you that beautiful question, what do you want to be when you grow up? And this is in year 9, year 10, where you've got to start making your elective selections for your, I don't even know, they still call it VCE? I think they still do. But for your secondary, specialized education to then help you get what you need to get into the university. And what do you know at 16? Like, I know how to talk shit with my mates and play sport. So my only real examples of career, if you like, aside from my parents, was my uncle, who, very successful accountant. I may have mentioned him before. I should have. I certainly sure that I would have. And I was pretty smart at school. So I'm pretty academic, pretty good with numbers. He looks like he's living a good lifestyle. I'm going to be an accountant. Now, a lot of this, you're going to see so many symmetries to identity, right? The identity-based work and how that and what that triggers in us, right? So I'm 16 years old. What are you going to be when you grow up? I'm going to be an accountant. That decision triggered so many adaptations in my behavior, because then it chose subjects that I would learn and would be exposed to. And all of a sudden, we paint this picture in our head of an accountant. And so now we start doing all the things and, being the guy that's going to be an accountant. Now, I did do well in VCE. I got into, I think it was my second choice of university. And now, surprise, surprise, something that I don't think that I've been too forthcoming with sharing is I didn't actually finish my uni degree. Now, I can tell you how I resolve that internally right now versus when I chose to not finish my degree, whatever I was, 20 years old, 21 years old. Very different. To me, I saw that as not following through, failure, giving up. I can say now, with the benefit of time, maturity, work that I've done internally, to understand that was probably my first example, which I didn't realize at the time, was it was right until it wasn't. Now, who I was at 16 making that decision versus who I became, and remember this word, becoming, right? Becoming. Who are we becoming? All my decisions were based on everything that I'd learned and lived as a 16-year-old. At 21, once I'd had some lived experience and evidence, I'd done my placement in an accounting firm, and I started to realize that there was this misalignment with what I thought versus the actual reality, and also, who I was at that point of the decision to who I am now at the opportunity to make another decision. So I knew it wasn't right for me, and so I chose to leave. Felt like I was quitting. Then I get into the car industry. I start as a salesperson. Fast forward, 27 years old, which is what the point in my life where I metaphorically feel is when I put my big boy pants on, when I went from being a boy to a man. And that was when I'd had my first professional fail and started to dig deep and really lock in on that decision to become a dealer principal of a car dealership. And I'm so grateful for making that decision, because the amount of development, decisions, growth that happened as a result of that focus from an identity point of view was so powerful. Now, I want to talk about something that this is something that I've since learned and developed over time. And in my coaching, when I am presenting, I'll always refer to there being two performance gaps. that we all face. One of them is the gap between what we know versus what we do. Like once upon a time, right? If you think about it, we would have said, if only I knew this, I could be that. But even like take out the AI era, as soon as www dot whatever, and we entered the information age, we don't have an information shortage, so knowledge isn't power. Applied knowledge is power. So that's the first thing. But the second performance gap that we all face, and this is the one that I'm going to lean into for this conversation, and it's certainly the one that not many people are really thinking about, but it is the gap between who we currently are and who we're capable of becoming. And now this one here takes a beautiful, healthy amount of imagination, which is something that is unfortunately beaten and bred out of most adults, just through, grow up, you can't do that, stop doing this. Our parents, God bless them, they start to put these limitations on us, and grow up, words are like that, so we stop using that imagination. What was possible for you when you were a child? Rhetorical, right? Everything was possible. And now what do you see is possible? We've got our lived experience, our limitations, and now, what we think is possible is going to be somewhat guarded. So the gap between who we currently are and who we're capable of becoming is going to take a fair bit of, imagination, reinstilling some of that imagination, but also visualization to create that. Because if you think about it, our personal reality becomes our personality. Now that's a play off. I'm pretty sure Joe Dispenza says that. And it's really so powerful from a psychological point of view, because if you think about it, how I see the world is based on the filters that I am looking through. So if you think of someone who's quite bitter and angry, how are they looking through the world? They're looking through the world through these jaded glasses where everything is glass half empty, it's happening to them. And now, no judgment, because it could be a series of things that have happened to them, but what it is really the story that they're telling themselves. And so therefore, this becomes the lens of how we see everything. The name of this psychological thing is escaping me, but you've heard it or it's happened to you before. Let's just say you want to buy a new Gucci bag, or you've decided that you want to buy a red Mustang, and then all of a sudden you start seeing people with Gucci bags and red Mustangs. And why is that? Because our brain, this powerful thing that we have, it needs to put on filters on how we see the world. Because if it literally took on everything, we would implode and explode. If we were to take in all the thousands of inputs that we are getting, not just every minute, but every second, color, object, definition, sound. So the brain has to put on these certain filters, which is why when you say, I want a red Mustang, all of a sudden it goes, okay, cool. I'm going to bring red Mustang into our field of view. But if you now put this onto, so what I'm saying is question the filters, okay? If I'm seeing the world and what I see is possible for me is through these filters, and someone else is going to have their filters, and everyone is going to have their unique filters, first question I'm going to ask you, and this is a really rhetorical, but this is going to take away every other fucking excuse that we ever have, is whatever lens you're looking through, positive or negative, were you born with it? The answer is no, because the only two primal fears that they say that we're ever born with is the fear of falling backwards and the fear of loud noises. And if it's something that we've worked out, the Red Bull guys have proven that we can get comfortable falling backwards. And those who are in army, artillery, and all the rest of it, they can be very comfortable around loud noises. So what it also tells you is even the ones that we are born with can be unlearned. So let alone all the other filters that we've learned along the way can be unlearned, rewired. Why is this important? Because now we're talking about, who we are versus who we're capable of becoming. And it's this becoming business, right? So when I was the car salesperson, and now I'm still a car salesperson before I'm thinking about, but I'm thinking about becoming a dealer principal. And so the first little reframe that I needed to evolve into is, rather than seeing myself as a car salesperson, I need to see myself as a professional, as a car selling professional. Because there is a difference, right? There's a difference the way the professional shows up, the way they reframe failure, the way they're more proactive, the way they start seeing things long game, and rather than seeing it as a job, they're seeing it as a career. So all of these things start to change in the way that we see the world, right? And if I take myself back to that point in time in my life, I was living in the western suburbs, and I was working in the beautiful eastern suburbs of Camberwell, of which my travel time would have been anywhere from, say, 50 minutes to an hour and 10 each way. And so I was like, how can I maximize this 2 to 2.5 hours of my day that is otherwise, sort of being zapped up? That was when I started to lean in on audiobooks, podcasts, YouTube clips on whatever was most important to me. And I'm telling you all of this because the identity piece of, like understanding to become a dealer principal means I need to become the best sales professional I can be before I can become the assistant manager, sales manager, and then one day dealer principal. And so locking in on this identity piece is really powerful in the decisions that we make in our behavior, our learning, our focus, all of these incredible things. If I fast forward the story a little bit to the point where I'm now in a position to get these dealer principal opportunities. And I remember the first one came through and I said no because there was no way I would work with that person. Just didn't like what they were about. The second one was a little different. I would have worked for the person, but the brand was a really low volume brand. That at that point in time, I believe they were selling like 10 units per month. I was managing a dealership that at that time was selling anywhere from 130 to 150 on a monthly average, with our personal best ever record being 204. So it's not so much that I needed stimulation. I just know that for me to really be my best, I need to be activated. And so I said no to that one. Then the third one, I was actually trying to think about it yesterday as I was preparing for this podcast episode on the third one. And I can't remember who it was and why I said no. What I do remember is the person saying to me very distinctly, Adrian, I believe that you've had a number of these offers come your way and you've said no. Just be mindful, if you keep saying no, perhaps the offers will stop coming. That was when I had to self-assess, why am I saying no? And I can say now that obviously I've done a fair bit of reflection, I've done a fair bit of work, and the pattern that I continue to see is, again, it was right until it wasn't. If I said to you right now, and I look back and I can actually bring it into a real life example right now, but if I said to you, there's this version of you who you're capable of becoming, and then there's this version of you that there's this version of you that you currently are, and then there's this version that you are capable of becoming. What you see as possible for you right now, based on this level of imagination, visualization, limitation based on your past experience, okay, is here. And then as you're evolving along the way, because you're starting to do the things, you've got the vision, you're now listening to the podcast, you're listening to the books, you're gaining evidence and confidence and proof through actual experience. And so now we're evolving, we're developing, right? We're becoming. And now maybe I'm here in this case, I was probably a little bit closer to becoming the dealer principal. But now, with this level of insight, intelligence, what I see possible for me now, maybe it's further than what I first thought. Maybe it's not even on that same trajectory. Maybe it's like I learned what I needed to learn here, and now I'm going to pivot this way. And sometimes we feel guilty about making that change. And I know that for me, it took a lot of soul searching before I made that decision to then pivot out of the car industry, an industry where I had locked in so hard on my identity. And if I take it back from just being a dealer principal, I really wanted to be the car guy, okay? And I wanted to be the car guy because that meant whether you were interested in a product that I was selling, a brand that I was selling or not, if you were interested in a car, I just want you to call me because I will probably help you or know someone. And that was who I became. Tony Robbins has got this really beautiful quote that says, one of the most powerful forces in the human existence is our need to remain consistent with how we see ourselves. That's the identity piece. I'm not sure when he said that. I can tell you that when I read it, it would have been maybe 15 years ago. I know that it didn't land as powerfully then, or maybe it did in a different way, because I was like, okay, well, I'm going to lock in. I want to be a sales professional. I want to be a dealer principal, so it helped me lock in then. But I think about it in so many other patterns, right? Good and bad. Very easy analogy. A smoker. A smoker sees themselves as a smoker and therefore behaves as a smoker because they have this need to remain consistent with how they see themselves and how other people see them. After a meal, I must have a cigarette. As soon as I wake up, I'm going to smoke a cigarette. After sex, I smoke a cigarette, right? Like there is just this pattern of behavior. And when I get off a plane, like if I don't have a cigarette when I'm on a plane, I get a little bit agitated. There's all of these beliefs that go along with this identity of how I see myself. Good, bad, and otherwise, we are creatures of that. So when I now jumped out of the car industry and now I've started this coaching space, what did I do? I leaned on to the very thing that created that safety for me, which I'm the sales guy and I'm the leadership guy. And so this is something to share with you, is that what I'm evolving in real time, because when I left, aside from the men's retreat, a lot of the courses and like coaching modules that I was creating I was selling to people that knew me as a sales guy and the car guy, but they are only a couple of tools that make up like who I am, what I do, and how I can help people. And I say that because something that I have developed along the way is this client zero mentality. So if you think about Richard Branson, who his popular quote is, take care of your people and they will take care of your business. Well, I sort of take that one layer deeper and I say, take care of yourself so you can take care of everything else. Because when people get me in because they have a sales issue or leadership issues, there are so many other things that influence them showing up in sales and being able to even see themselves as someone who can go from X to Y or become a manager. There's all these limiting beliefs. There's the filters on the way we see ourselves. There's the energy that we have to bring into it. There is the why are we even doing what we do. There is the clarity in terms of goals, but not just your work goals, but your life goals, your health goals. And sometimes I don't want to go too deep and too off track, but for me, sales and leadership are just two I don't even think strings in the bow is the right word. It's like there are so many other things that influence it, which is what I'm now leaning more into in real time. And, the universe always tests us, because I had, I've been leaning more into, creating some of these workshops and keynotes and coaching containers that are more into the human development, and really starting to branch just not more heavily out of the automotive industry exclusively, semi-exclusively, and into it's just people, right? And then I got an email come through on Thursday, quick story, that was about a training opportunity in the car industry. And I remember, I'm like, oh, okay, this is pretty cool. And then in the email, it said, back to basics, sales 101. And I was like, if I accept this is me accepting an identity that I've now outgrown, who I was. And the universe and God, or whatever you believe in, will send you tests along the way to see if you're ready to continue to evolve in who you're becoming. So I did reply to that email, and I gave them a new perspective, and whether they consider it or not, that is not up to me, but staying true to me is what was most important. Now, what does this mean to you? The pattern that I continue to recognize, because maybe you weren't the school student who wanted to become an accountant, but you wanted to become something. And maybe you weren't in your career that you didn't want to become a dealer principal, but you've been working hard towards whatever it is. And I want you to consider, because again, it doesn't have to be the insert your career here, but who we were when we made the decisions and who we are now, aside from it being perfectly acceptable to grow, change, and evolve, it is what we are intended to, right? Our evolution is I want to say, it's inevitable. Some people choose to not evolve, but think about it. Whether it was 5 months, a decision you made 5 months ago, maybe you've been in a role for 5 years, 15 years, just because you were good at it, is that a good enough reason to continue staying? Or perhaps you're the ambitious one who always was seeking career progression, title progression, income growth, always chasing down your goals. But perhaps your definition of success that you had when you were 25 years old, perhaps that doesn't fit the same way that it does now. And whatever it is, I think that the fundamental concept I want you to take from this is we are constantly becoming, and sometimes we lock in so hard on becoming this particular person, and we forget that it is actually okay to continue becoming. I'm so grateful for locking in on that identity to be a dealer principal. I feel that it was incredibly liberating for me at a point in my life when I didn't know my purpose, but it gave me somewhere to direct my energy, my focus, my learning, my habits, and ultimately the way I see myself. But so many people do I see that they treat an identity as a life sentence. And so I feel like that's the question that I want to put to you. Whereabouts in your life are you still accepting or behaving in an identity of who you were, but doesn't really align in who you are today, or more so who you want to become? Because this whole, it was right when it was until it's not, I feel like that's the thing that we need to bring back. And if you recall in one of my previous episodes, I said that part of good process is assessing the process, right? what's working? The three questions and I'm not trying to add too many more questions, but it's like, what went well? What are the things that I can look back and go, oh man, this is what I learned. This has been awesome. I love this about me and who I am. What needs work, right? What am I not enjoying? Because that's the part where it's like, what am I accepting as opposed to facing, evolving, shedding, whatever the case may be? And what am I going to do about it? Because that's where the element or opportunity for growth is. So I feel like that's the opportunity that we all constantly face. Some of us lean into it, some of us push against it, and it's that very resistance that you need to use as a barometer or an indicator, should I say, of what do I need to focus on. Because that is always going to give you the greatest growth. So when you're considering that question, what in my life belongs to the person that I was but no longer fits the person that I'm becoming? Think about that across every area of your life. Not just your career, but your relationships, friendships, in your health, in your habits, in your definition of success, expectations, even in your goals. And I really want to be conscious that this is not about burning it all down. And I don't even want you to necessarily go and make some radical immediate changes. I just want you to notice. Okay, I want you to notice what comes up. And again, using that resistance as your indicator and barometer. But what I want you to know is that making these big changes doesn't have to result in destruction, burning it all down. And it doesn't have to be failure, like you're giving up or whatever the case may be. But I want you to reframe it as recognition, that you are recognizing that the decision that you are in a position to make now is in line with who you are now based on growth and evidence that you have gained along the way. Because who you were when you made that first decision 5 months, 5 years, 15 years ago was based on that level of information. And now you are recognizing your growth, your needs, your desires, your new vision, your opportunity of what's possible. And yeah, if there was any meaning of life, it is to continue to discover life, your potential. I don't want to be too blasé about that because that is very unique for everybody, but it is something that I do love talking about with individuals about what it actually means to them. So yeah, the goal isn't to become who you said you would be. The goal is to continue becoming. And so until next time, I want you to remember you are client zero, okay? Lead yourself first. And if you're gonna build anything, build it to last. Thanks again.